They said I was the problem. The one who couldn't let things go. The one who always took things too personally. But they didn't hear the silence. They didn't feel what it was like to be erased, slowly, deliberately, without a single word. She didn't say goodbye. She just disappeared. From my phone. From holidays. From birthdays. It wasn't hate. It was something colder. They rewrote my story before I had the chance to live it. And no one asked me if the version they believed was true. I used to replay that last conversation over and over again, wondering if it was that one sentence I said too bluntly, or maybe the moment I didn't show up fast enough when she needed help. But honestly, I'll never know, because she never explained. She just closed the door and locked it. Years went by. Quiet, gray years. Years where I was alive, but not really invited to life. You know what I mean? When family gatherings happen without you. When people send a group text and accidentally forget to include your number. When you're scrolling Instagram and see your family posing, smiling, joyful, in a moment you weren't even told about. And the worst part? It starts to make you question your own memory. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I did mess it all up. But then something happened. Something I didn't expect. A letter. Not from her, but from her daughter. A child who once ran to me with scraped knees and crooked braids, who used to call me her favorite grown-up. Now, she had written me a letter. The envelope had no return address. Just my name. Just my handwriting, written by someone else. And the moment I held it in my hands, I froze. Because I could feel the past rushing back. Not like a flood, but like a whisper that finally dared to speak. I'll tell you what the letter said soon. But first, you need to understand why that letter shattered something inside me. And also began to rebuild something I thought was lost forever. My name is Caroline, I'm 38, and I live in Portland, Oregon. But that's not where the story begins. It begins with what I lost. And what I found in the most unexpected way. Growing up, my sister and I were inseparable. Her name is Samantha, 2 years older, infinitely more confident, and always the one people listened to first. She had this way of commanding a room without raising her voice. And me? I was the quiet one, the emotional one, the one with journals filled with poetry no one read. But we were close, tied together by secrets whispered at night and matching scars from falling off our bikes. We were each other's first friend. And for a long time, I thought we'd grow old together, matching coffee mugs in our 60s, our kids calling each other cousins but acting more like siblings. There was even a plan. She would become a nurse like our mom. I'd go into publishing, write children's books, maybe teach creative writing. Simple dreams. Shared dreams. But life doesn't stick to the script. In my early 20s, I struggled hard. A breakup that cracked something deep inside me. A diagnosis of anxiety and depression that felt like a death sentence in our tightly wound, achievement-focused family. I remember sitting on the edge of my childhood bed, my palms sweaty, rehearsing how to tell my parents that I had dropped out of grad school. I didn't even get the words out before my dad said, "She's just taking a break." My mom didn't speak at all. She just nodded too quickly. And Samantha? She patted my shoulder, then never brought it up again. That's when the distance started. Not the loud kind. Not a fight or argument. It was the kind that hides inside polite smiles and how are yous with no real room for answers. I tried to stay involved. I showed up at family dinners. I helped her plan her wedding. I even watched her baby when she needed someone last minute. But something had changed. It was like she had quietly decided, "You're not like us anymore." And maybe I wasn't. They were climbing the ladders, careers, kids, houses. And I was in therapy learning how to breathe again. Volunteering at the local library. Writing small things no one saw. But I was healing. I was rebuilding. I remember the last time we spoke on the phone. I told her I had started a blog, sharing mental health tools, journaling prompts, and reflections from my own journey. She said, "That's nice. Must be fun to have that kind of time." The words were sharp, but the way she said it, flat, disinterested, cut deeper. After that call, I stopped reaching out. I didn't block her. I didn't send a dramatic goodbye. I just stopped texting first. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. I watched her daughter, Emily, grow up through social media photos and secondhand stories from cousins. And every time I saw her face, so much like Samantha's, but with those same wide, wondering eyes I remembered from when she was little, it stung. Because I wasn't part of her world anymore. And no one seemed to care. Family events happened without me. My name became the ghost in the room. Someone would mention me, only for the subject to change instantly. Once, at our aunt's funeral, I overheard my uncle whisper, "We don't talk about that anymore." That was me. And the worst part? I started to believe maybe they were right to forget me. Maybe I had failed. Maybe I was too much. I stopped writing, stopped dreaming, until one morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize who I'd become. And that's when I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't try to be invited back. I would start over, on my own terms. No fanfare. No announcement. Just a new beginning. Even if no one noticed. Starting over didn't look impressive. There was no grand relaunch of my life. No social media post with a caption that said, "New chapter begins." It started with a desk. A wobbly, secondhand desk I found on Craigslist for $20. I placed it next to the window in my tiny apartment and told myself I would write something every day. Not for anyone else. Not for likes or claps or validation. Just for me. At first, I couldn't finish a paragraph. My words felt hollow. My voice faint. But I kept going. Little by little, something shifted. I began writing letters. Not to people I knew, but to strangers. Letters to anyone who had ever felt invisible. I posted them on a blog I named Quiet Fire. I didn't expect anyone to read them, but they did. One, then 10, then hundreds. People from small towns, big cities, broken homes, broken hearts. They left comments like, "I thought I was the only one. You put into words what I couldn't." It was small, unremarkable, but it gave me breath again. During this time, I also started volunteering at a community center twice a week. They had a digital literacy program for seniors, teaching them how to use smartphones, email, video chat. I didn't have formal training, but I knew how to be patient. And sometimes, that's all anyone needs. There was one woman I'll never forget. Her name was Dolores, 84, fierce as fire, and deeply suspicious of anything with a screen. She'd sit across from me with narrowed eyes and say things like, "This machine hates me. I press the button, it screams." One day, after several failed attempts to open her inbox, I offered to help her create a shortcut to her son's contact. He lived out of state. They hadn't video called in over a year. She said it was too complicated. We worked through it, slowly, step by step. And when his face finally appeared on the screen, live, smiling, calling her mom, she cried. And then so did I. Through the tears, she whispered, "You brought my baby into my living room." That moment stayed with me, because it reminded me that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a room with flickering lights, mismatched chairs, and the echo of a laugh that hadn't been heard in years. After that, I started collecting their stories. Not for a book, not for glory, just so someone someday would know they existed, that they mattered. Quiet Fire became more than a blog. It became a space for reflection, for remembrance, for quiet victories. I wrote at night, taught during the day, laughed more, cried less. No one in my family knew. They didn't ask. They didn't call. But I was okay. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for their approval to feel alive. And it didn't make headlines. But it mattered. I didn't notice it at first. Growth never shows up with a neon sign. It sneaks in quietly while you're busy doing the work. The blog Quiet Fire started reaching more people. What began as a handful of anonymous readers turned into thousands, then tens of thousands. A local therapist shared one of my posts with her clients. A university professor emailed me asking to use my writing in her trauma literature class. And then a nonprofit reached out. They wanted help building a support program for adult children estranged from their families. They had read my open letter. To the ones who cut us off without saying why. I joined the project as a contributor, and eventually as a partner. We launched Reconnect Circles, virtual spaces where people could come together, not to fix each other, but simply to be seen. And the senior tech program? That grew too. I collaborated with a few local libraries and retirement homes. We started onboarding over 1,200 seniors a month to digital tools that help them reconnect with family, access telehealth, and regain independence. One grant led to another. And within a year, we had launched in 4 states. At our peak, we recorded a 78% email open rate, higher than most Fortune 500 companies. But I didn't brag about it. Not because I wasn't proud, but because success felt different now. It wasn't something to wave in people's faces. It was something to hold close, like a warm secret you weren't quite ready to share. Still, part of me hoped they'd notice. That someone in my family would stumble across my name, my voice, my work, and say, we were wrong about her. But they didn't. One afternoon, I ran into my cousin Sarah at a grocery store. We hadn't seen each other in years. She hugged me like nothing had changed. And then said, "So, are you still doing that online journal thing?" I nodded. She smiled, then added, "It's sweet that you have time for hobbies." I wish I did. A hobby. That's what they thought it was. The programs I'd helped build, the letters I'd written that stopped strangers from ending their lives, the growing team that now included therapists, tech specialists, volunteers, all of it boiled down to a cute little thing I did on the side. And my sister? Nothing. Not a word. Not a call. Not even a passive-aggressive comment. She had scrubbed me from her life so completely, it was like I never existed. I saw photos of her daughter, Emily, going to prom, getting her driver's license, graduating, all through other people's posts. I would zoom in sometimes just to see the details, what kind of shoes she wore, whether she still had that tiny birthmark on her left cheek. It wasn't stalking. It was longing, a kind of aching curiosity that doesn't know where to go. Once I ran into my aunt at a wedding. She looked at me and said, "I hear you're teaching old folks how to click buttons. Real noble work." Then she turned and walked away. I laughed later, not because it was funny, but because it hurt exactly the way I expected it to. And that kind of pain becomes predictable, almost familiar. It's strange, isn't it? How you can be seen by the world, but still invisible to the people whose approval you wanted most. But I didn't let it stop me. I couldn't, because something bigger than validation was growing inside me. It was purpose. It was resilience. It was the quiet knowing that I was building something real, even if the people I used to love refused to look. It happened on a Sunday. Cloudy, quiet, unassuming. The kind of day you forget until something unforgettable happens. I was invited to speak at a community wellness conference. Not a huge event. Mostly local therapists, educators, and nonprofit leaders. I almost declined. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys microphones or spotlights. But the invitation came from someone I respected deeply. And something in me whispered, "Go." So I did. The panel was on modern healing spaces. I was seated next to a grief counselor and a youth program director. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I shared how Quiet Fire began, how writing anonymously became a bridge to connection, how letters turned into programs, how showing up for strangers helped me come home to myself. Afterward, a few people lingered to talk. Some asked about volunteering. Some just said, "Thank you." And then, as I was packing up, I noticed her. A girl, maybe 18 or 19, hovering at the edge of the room. Curly hair pulled into a loose bun, eyes uncertain but determined. She stepped forward, clutching a worn notebook to her chest. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. I think you know my mom." I blinked, tilted my head. "I'm sorry, what's your name?" She smiled nervously. "Emily." And for a second, just a second, time folded in on itself. My heart stopped. My breath caught, because I did know her mom. I knew her mom better than anyone once did. I cleared my throat. Emily, as in. She nodded. My mom, Samantha. I couldn't speak. Could barely stand upright. She must have seen it in my face. That mix of shock, longing, and grief that had been sitting quietly inside me for years. Emily glanced down at the notebook, then held it out. I wrote you something, she said. My mom doesn't know I'm here. I took it, hands trembling, eyes stinging. She hesitated, then added, I've been reading Quiet Fire since I was 16. I found it by accident. I didn't know it was you, not at first. She swallowed. It made me feel less alone, especially when my mom didn't want to talk about things, or when I had questions no one would answer. I opened the notebook slowly. The first page was a letter. To the aunt I wasn't allowed to know, it began. I want you to know. I see you. I found you. You're not invisible to me. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Not from sadness, but from something else. Something deeper than relief. Recognition. The kind that arrives like sunrise through a window you thought was painted shut. Emily stepped forward and gently hugged me.
She was tall now.
Almost eye level. But I still remembered her as the tiny girl who once called me Auntie Lou. She pulled back and said, I've known for a while. I just didn't know how to reach you. Or if you'd want me to. I laughed softly, brushing tears from my face. Emily, I've thought about you every day. She smiled, eyes glassy. I'm in college now, studying psychology.
And writing.
Like you. Something broke open in my chest. The kind of break that lets light in.
We sat and talked.
For hours. About everything. About nothing. She told me how her mom avoided certain topics. How growing up there was always a blank space where I used to be. And how one day, she searched my name online. And Quiet Fire came up. She'd been reading ever since. She said, I thought maybe you were writing to me. And in a way, I was. Every post, every letter, every line meant for someone who had been cut off without explanation. It was meant for her too. Before she left, she turned and asked, Do you want to meet again? Maybe for coffee? I nodded, smiling through tears. More than anything. And as I watched her walk away, the notebook still in my hands, I felt it. The moment when the truth finally stood up for itself. Not because I demanded attention. Not because I shouted or performed or begged. But because the truth walked in by itself and refused to stay quiet. After that day, something inside me settled. Like a storm finally losing interest in the sky. Emily and I kept in touch. Coffee became a weekly ritual. We didn't try to patch up the missing years. We just let new ones bloom. She told me more about her childhood. About the silences. About the things her mother refused to explain. And I listened. Not to judge. Not to correct. But to honor the girl who had spent so long trying to put together pieces no one would name. One evening, after coffee, she handed me an envelope. No return address. Just my name and handwriting I hadn't seen in years.
Samantha.
I froze. Emily gave me a small nod. She asked me to pass it on. She doesn't know what to say to you directly yet. But she wrote this. I opened it later that night. Alone. With a cup of tea. And a deep breath. Inside was a letter.
Short.
Stilted. But honest. I didn't know how to handle your choices. I didn't know how to let go of what I thought you should be. And instead of asking questions, I made judgments. I was wrong. I'm sorry for the silence. I'm sorry for keeping Emily from you. She's lucky to have found you on her own. I read it twice. Then again. And then I put it away, not to forget it, but because I didn't need it to define me. It didn't erase the hurt. It didn't magically make things whole. But it mattered. Later that week, I got a message from my mom. Just a photo. Of my first blog post. Printed out. Underlined. And next to it, a sticky note. You always knew who you were. I just didn't. I'm sorry. It was quiet. No fanfare. No public declaration. But it was enough. And my brother? He sent me a text. A single emoji. The flame.
Fire.
He used to tease me about quiet fire. And now, that emoji felt like a bow of respect. No one said, "You were right." No one said, "We should have believed in you." But they didn't need to. I had already built a world without their applause. And now that they were clapping, it didn't change the foundation. It just echoed differently. I walked through my neighborhood one afternoon and saw an elderly man showing his neighbor how to use a tablet. He said, "There's this program someone made. It's changed my life." He didn't know it was me. And I didn't tell him. I just smiled and walked on. Because this was the peace I had earned. Not pride. Not ego.
Peace.
The kind that comes when you stop needing the people who left you to validate the person you became in their absence. I didn't frame the letter for my sister. I didn't respond with a dramatic speech. I just folded it carefully, tucked it between pages of an old journal, not to revisit often, but to remind myself, even silence can find its voice. Even wounds can whisper, "I'm healing." And Emily, she became the bridge between my past and my future, between what was lost and what found its way home anyway. If you've ever felt forgotten, this story was for you. If you've ever sat at a dinner table surrounded by people who knew you but didn't see you, this was for you. If you've ever walked away from the life others wrote for you, with trembling hands and a heart full of doubt, this was for you. Because I know what it means to be cut out of photos before the camera even flashes, to be written out of stories while you're still breathing, to be told your path is a phase, your passion just a hobby, your pain too much to deal with. But let me tell you something real. They don't get to define you. They don't get to seal your story with their silence. You are still being written.
You are not finished.
You are not forgotten. You are not alone. And sometimes, the most powerful recognition doesn't come from applause. It comes from one quiet voice, saying, "You matter to me." That letter from Emily? It didn't reverse the years I lost. It didn't make the pain go away. But it did something better. It made those years worth something. Because while I was out here building a life in the dark, someone was watching. Someone was learning. Someone was finding her own voice. Because I dared to keep using mine. You don't need a stage. You don't need perfect words. You just need to tell your truth. Loudly or softly. Again and again. Until someone finds it. And says, "Me too." Where are you watching from right now? What letter are you still holding in your heart? Who have you been waiting to hear from? Or maybe the better question is, who's been waiting to hear from you? Write the letter. Make the call. Start the project. Begin again. You never know who's reading. You never know who you're healing. Even when you're healing yourself. This space, this channel, this story, it's not just mine. It's ours. A place where quiet victories matter. Where broken things become beautiful. Where second chances aren't begged for. They're built. So, if no one's clapped for you lately, let this be the sound of my hands. Reminding you, you're doing better than you think. You are further along than you feel. And somewhere out there, someone's life is already better. Because you didn't give up. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. If this story found you at the right moment, tell me below. Where are you watching from? What are you building in silence? What truth are you ready to speak? Because the comments on this channel aren't just a conversation. They're a lifeline. They're proof that we are real, we are here, and we are rising. More stories are coming. More quiet fires are waiting to be lit. Until then,
Stay soft.
stay strong, and never let the silence convince you that your voice doesn't matter. It does. It always has. And it always will.